Most preppers have food, water, ammo, and medication squared away, and that's exactly where it should be. But there's one thing almost nobody actually prepares, and it's the thing that's going to determine whether you survive or fall apart when things go sideways for real. It's your mind. I'm not talking about meditation apps or positive thinking. I'm talking about practical, field-tested tools that keep you functional, keep you making good decisions, and keep you from becoming a liability to the people depending on you when the world stops making sense. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly why even tough, experienced people completely lose it in collapse scenarios, and what you can do right now, today, before anything happens, to make sure that's not you. Here's what nobody tells you about crisis situations. Your gear doesn't save you. Your stockpile doesn't save you. Your brain saves you, or it gets you and everyone with you killed. During Hurricane Katrina, there were people sitting in their houses with full emergency kits, completely paralyzed, unable to make a single decision, while their neighbors with almost nothing figured out how to move, adapt, and get out. The difference wasn't resources, it was mental state. So here's what's actually happening inside your skull when a serious threat hits. Your amygdala fires before your conscious mind even processes what's going on. Cortisol and adrenaline flood your system. Heart rate spikes. Blood moves away from your prefrontal cortex, that's your logic, planning, and decision-making center, and goes into your muscles so you can fight or run. 100,000 years ago, against a predator, that's exactly what you want. In a multi-day grid-down situation where you need to think clearly, manage your family, and solve problems you've never faced before, that same response will wreck you. Special Forces soldiers don't train to eliminate that stress response. They train to keep their decision-making online while it's happening. That's the target. Not, don't feel fear. Feel it and function anyway. The first 3 days of any serious collapse scenario are when the majority of psychological casualties happen. Not physical casualties, psychological ones. People freezing, people making catastrophically bad calls, people shutting down completely. There are 3 reasons for this, and if you understand them ahead of time, you're already ahead of 90% of people. First, normalcy bias. Even after something catastrophic has clearly happened, your brain keeps insisting it's temporary. The power will come back. Someone's going to fix this. It can't be as bad as it looks. Studies show around 80% of people display this in real disasters. In Katrina, people sat in their homes waiting for help that wasn't coming while the window to move was closing. This isn't stupidity. It's a built-in mechanism that normally keeps you from panicking over small problems. In a real collapse, it costs you critical hours you don't get back. Second, decision fatigue hitting all at once. Suddenly, you're facing an avalanche of decisions simultaneously. Where to go, what to take, who to trust, what's the priority, and your brain, already running hot on cortisol, starts to seize up. The more options, the worse it gets. Third, panic is contagious, and this one gets underestimated badly. Humans are neurologically wired to sync emotionally with the people around them. When everyone around you is losing it, your brain reads that as a threat signal and ramps up your own stress response, even if you've personally assessed the situation as manageable. You can be the most prepared person in the room and still get pulled into the spiral if you don't understand this dynamic. The most effective thing you can do for your mental performance under pressure costs you nothing except an afternoon and some honest thinking. There's a difference between having a plan and having a pre-built decision framework. A plan says, we'll bug out to the cabin if things get bad. A decision framework says, if the grid is down 48 hours with no restoration ETA, we go. If there are civil disturbances within 10 miles, we go immediately, no debate. If we can't reach each other for more than 6 hours, we meet at the fallback location 45 miles north. If we can't reach that location in time, here's option C. The reason this matters is that your brain under high cortisol load is genuinely worse at generating new solutions on the fly. It's significantly better at executing ones you've already made. Military decision-making doctrine is built entirely on this principle. You're not thinking freshly under fire. You're running a decision tree you built when you were calm. So sit down today. Write out your bug-out triggers. Write out who makes the final call in your group when there's disagreement. Write out your communication protocol if cell networks go down. Write out what happens if you get separated from family. Print it out. Review it every few months. When the stress hits, you're not generating, you're executing. That is a massive advantage. The military has used this for decades, and it's the most underused tool in the entire prepping community. Stress inoculation means deliberately exposing yourself to controlled versions of the stressors you expect to face, so your nervous system learns to stay functional inside them. The first time you experience genuine cold, real hunger, serious sleep deprivation, or actual fear, the stress response is intense because it's novel. Your brain treats novelty as a threat amplifier. By the 10th time, your nervous system has updated its file. This is survivable. I've been here before. I can work inside this. This is why people who've been through genuinely hard things often outperform people with better resources in crisis situations. It's not genetics. It's calibration through experience. You can build this deliberately. Take cold showers until they stop being stressful. Do 24 to 48-hour fasts, not for health trends, but to teach yourself what real hunger feels like and to prove to your brain that it doesn't stop you. Put on your full BOB, that's your bug-out bag with actual weight in it, and practice navigation, fire starting, or field medicine while you're physically tired, cold, and hungry. Work your skills under time pressure with deliberate distractions. Every one of those sessions builds a reference file in your brain. I've been in uncomfortable, high-stress situations before, and I functioned. That library is worth more than most of the gear in your garage. In any real crisis, you're not operating alone. You're going to have family members, neighbors, or group members in various states of panic, denial, or complete shutdown. And their mental state is going to affect your operational capacity whether you want it to or not. The people around you are not failing when they panic. They're having a normal neurological response to an abnormal situation. If you respond with contempt or frustration, you add interpersonal conflict on top of an already overloaded situation, and you make yourself less effective in the process. What actually works comes from psychological first aid, the framework used by crisis responders worldwide. It's two things: grounding and tasking. Grounding pulls someone out of catastrophic future projection and back into the present. People in panic are mentally living in a catastrophic imagined future. Everything is over. There's no way out. It's all lost. You don't argue with that. You redirect. Hey, right now, in this moment, are you physically okay? Good. Look at me. We're solving one thing at a time. Then you task them. Give them something concrete, specific, and achievable. I need you to fill these 5-gallon containers and number them 1 through 5. Then tell me exactly how many gallons we have total. That task does something neurologically real. It gives the brain a solvable problem, which shifts it out of threat response mode and into action mode. The task doesn't have to be critical to your survival. It just has to be real and achievable. This works on adults, kids, and elderly people equally. If someone is spiraling, give them a job. It's one of the most effective psychological interventions that exists, and it takes about 10 seconds to deploy. Under crisis conditions, your brain tries to process everything simultaneously: the immediate threat, the medium-term problem, what this means long-term, the emotional weight of what's happening, fear about the people you care about. Processing all of that at once while also trying to function is like trying to run 10 programs on a computer that barely has the RAM for 2. Everything slows down or crashes completely. Compartmentalization is the deliberate practice of boxing up what you cannot solve right now and focusing only on the immediate window, the next hour, sometimes just the next 10 minutes. It's not suppression. You're not pretending the hard stuff doesn't exist. You're telling yourself, I can't solve that in the next hour. That goes in the box. Right now I'm running water, shelter, and perimeter. That's it. The way to build this before you need it is to practice it in regular life. When you're dealing with multiple stressors at once, work, family, finances, all hitting at the same time, consciously pick one and deliberately set the others aside with a specific internal statement. I'm dealing with that after I handle this. It feels almost too simple, but it's a trainable cognitive skill, and the reps you put in now are directly transferable to high-stress scenarios later. This one sounds almost too basic, but it's consistently backed by research on how people maintain mental function in prolonged crisis, and it's consistently underestimated. Routine signals to your brain that there is still structure, still predictability, still some degree of agency. When routine collapses entirely, psychological stability tends to follow it down. Viktor Frankl survived Nazi concentration camps and spent the rest of his life studying how people maintained psychological function under conditions most of us can't even imagine. One of his consistent observations was that people who held on to small routines and rituals, even completely arbitrary ones, maintained their sense of self and their will to function significantly better than those who abandoned all structure. In a grid-down scenario, this means deliberately maintaining daily anchors, even when everything around you is chaotic. Fixed wake and sleep times to whatever degree is possible. Scheduled meals, even if they're small. Defined work periods and rest periods. A short morning and evening family check-in. What got done? What's the priority? Who's responsible for what? If you have children with you, this matters twice as much. Kids calibrate their emotional safety almost entirely by watching the adults around them. If the adults maintain routine and relative calm, children's nervous systems settle. If the adults are visibly in chaos, children move into sustained high-alert states that add real management burden to your situation on top of everything else. Everything I've laid out works better, significantly better, if you start building it now, before you ever need it. Stress inoculation only works if you've done the reps in advance. Decision frameworks only help if they exist before the pressure hits. Compartmentalization is a skill that requires practice. But underneath all of it, there's something that doesn't get talked about enough in prepping circles, and I think it's actually the foundation. Your psychological resilience is directly connected to your sense of purpose and the strength of your relationships. People with strong reasons to survive and genuine connections to other people are consistently more resilient in crisis situations than people without them. This is documented across decades of survival psychology research. It's not soft, it's structural. What that means practically? Build your community now. Know your neighbors. Have people who know your plans and whose plans you know, because isolation is one of the fastest routes to psychological breakdown under extended stress, and no amount of individual mental toughness fully makes up for it. The lone wolf with perfect gear almost always loses to a connected group with average gear and people who trust each other. Every time. Your real prep is the work you do on your mind today, before the moment arrives and it's the only thing left that matters. If this was useful, share it with someone in your circle who's serious about being actually ready, not just stocked up. And drop in the comments which of these tools you want me to go deeper on. I read them all.